welcome to today's episode of Queerly Natural, where we talk about queerness in the natural world. We discuss different traits and qualities of animals, plants, fungi, and more, and how they relate to queer identities in humans. Some may argue our identities are not natural, and we are here to say they queerly are. We're your hosts. I'm Alana.
And I'm Sage. As always, I'd like to start by thanking our Legacy Tree patron, Nate. Thanks, Nate. If you'd like to join Nate in supporting the show, you can contribute to our Patreon or Ko-fi, or you can shout us out on social media. Today's episode will feature our first guest speaker, Sri Lakshmi Suresh. Unfortunately, we didn't get to every topic we'd intended to with Sri Lakshmi, so they will likely be back for a bonus episode in the future. But join us today to talk with Sri Lakshmi Suresh about the honeybee, a cute little fan favorite with a weird take on biological sex.
Hey everyone! We are very excited for this week's episode of Queerly Natural because we have our first guest. We would like to welcome Sri Lakshmi, who is a bee biologist. They have been studying bees since 2015. And not only that, but they are a queer scientist and spend their time being the president and founder of our school's FUSE, which is the Foraging, Unity, Solidarity, and Equity for QTPOC, along with being on the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center Advisory Committee. So lots of science, lots of queer, and we're so happy you are here. I rhymed. Would you like to say hi?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sri Lakshmi Suresh. My pronouns are they, them, and as Ilana stated, I am a queer person of color and a scientist who studies honeybees.
This is gonna be a great episode.
Bee puns are definitely part of the contract as being a bee scientist.
Perfect. So, yeah, if we want to just jump on in, would you like to tell us about bees and specifically some queerness with bees?
Sure, that's a big topic. So I guess to go a little big picture, so I specifically study honeybees, Apis mellifera, and the important thing to note about honeybees is that they are cool, they are pollinators, but they are domesticated livestock. So while it's important to say, quote, save the bees and such, the bees you want to be saving are bumblebees and sweat bees and leafcutter bees. Honeybees are taken care of by farmers, so they will eventually be fine.
I just want to cut in with a fun fact here. Because bees are livestock, where I went to undergrad, you had to have a fence around your beehives because the city ordinance stated that every livestock has to be surrounded by a fence. So that was the only way the campus was allowed to have hives.
Keeps the vandals out, at least. Those crazy hooligans.
So one of the things that's kind of wild about beekeeping is that most non-beekeepers are not so interested in stealing bees because most people are like, oh boy, stinging insects, I'm going to stay away. However, it's quite expensive to start up a beekeeping operation, and so theft of the actual hives is actually quite a problem, and a lot of apiaries are behind locked gates because if you have a unruly neighbor who notices you have hives and they come in the middle of the night and steal your hives, not that this happens frequently, but it has happened that other beekeepers will steal hives because if you wanted to start a beekeeping operation from scratch, even in your backyard, just the cost of like getting all the equipment and materials for 2 hives would be a minimum of $3,000 to $5,000. So it's quite costly.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. That's like all the specialized equipment and stuff.
Yeah, and it's one of those things once you have a lot of the starting equipment, it's easier to add on to. But even then, for instance, to buy a package, which many beekeepers will buy in the spring if they have significant losses over the winter, which is a problem we're seeing more and more in the US these past few years. I believe this year, 2022, the national loss rate for overwintering bees was about 30%, which is insane, and that's not sustainable for you to lose 30% of your livestock. That would completely decimate your revenue, your livelihood if it were, say, like cows or sheep or goat. And it's similarly awful for beekeepers who do beekeeping as a full-time profession. But these packages, they come with a mated queen bee and about a pound of bees. So we're talking like maybe around 500 to 1,000 bees.
What, they weigh them? That's so crazy.
How do you weigh bees?
Yeah, because if you think about it, it's quite difficult to like count individual worker bees because you have hundreds or thousands of them. So it's more efficient to weigh them because their weight is pretty constant. So you can very well estimate how many bees are in a package.
So do you just like catch them in a bag and throw them on a scale? Is that how you weigh them?
Packages usually are contained within boxes with chicken wire as the kind of ventilation, but they have the queen and then about a pound of bees. The price varies, but here in the Midwest, it's usually about $200 for a package, and that's a pretty fair price for a package, and that's of course excluding the cost of your equipment. But if you can imagine spending, it can vary anywhere from like about 150 to 250. So the average I'd say is $200 a package. If you have 10 hives, you lose 3 of them, you've got to buy 3 more packages, then you're suddenly out $600 at the start of your season. So it's quite expensive.
Right. I have a quick question. So you mentioned that honeybees are non-native and they're livestock, and it's more important to be saving our native bumblebees, sweat peas, all that stuff. And obviously there's like a cost barrier to helping the honeybees. Is it easier to create habitat or like sort of cultivate native bees?
I would say so, because honeybees, of course, were brought by European colonizers to pollinate exotic fruit crops like apples are not native to North America, almonds are not native to North America. A lot of these crops that we eat and of course like are important for our food supply that honeybees pollinate. We need honeybees, we need those crops, but again, they're not native. And so when we're thinking about sweat bees, leafcutter bees, bumblebees, one of my favorite parts about helping them is the fact that it's almost the best thing to do nothing. And I mean that in one of the best things, if you do have a yard, is to not mow it. Let your grass grow, let some of the wildflowers that some people will call weeds sprout up, because those wildflowers are actually what is native in the area, and that's why they're the first ones to come back as soon as you let your grass grow out a little bit. And that's what the native pollinators will go to. And similarly, in the do nothing, if you reduce your pesticide use on your lawn, I promise you are not going to lose the entire property of your home with a single dandelion in the middle of your lawn.
But it's yellow and in the center of the green.
And not spending the money on the pesticides will, of course, you don't have to spend the money there, you don't have to spend the time applying it. And pesticide toxicity, of course, is its own other podcast, I'm sure. But by not applying pesticides, by letting some of the native flowers grow, that's some of the best things you can do to help solve some of the habitat fragmentation. And even if you have like a balcony, if you live in an apartment, you could just, find a native plant that is growing as a wildflower and just pick it up and grow it in a pot on your balcony. And the chances are, if it's a wildflower, it's a native flower in the area, you basically don't have to do anything for it because it's used to growing in the local area.
Aw, this makes me feel so good. I have a pot on like a little shelf. It's not like quite a balcony, but it's like a tiny balcony, and it had a fern in it, and I abandoned the fern and it died. And then just a random weed started growing, and I just left it because I was like, I want to see what it ends up looking like. And so that makes me feel great that I'm helping bees with it.
And of course, like, the degree to which are you going to solve climate change? Are you going to solve the fact that the rusty patch bumblebee is endangered by doing these things? No. But are you actually doing something for your local microhabitat and to help boost the population of your local pollinators? Yes.
Right. It's something.
It's funny too, because like I remember being a little kid and being in love with the dandelions in the yard and the clover and all of the natives that we consider weeds. And I was told by people like, no, that's a weed, that's bad. And be like, but they're so pretty. And it's kind of like coming back to that and being like, maybe we thought they were pretty for a good reason.
Yeah, and weeds, there's no set definition of a weed. A weed is just a plant growing in a place that humans don't want it to grow. So if you have a show-stopping, like prize-worthy rose bush, but it's in the middle of your lawn and you don't want it there, that's a weed.
Right.
A weed is just what humans define as a plant that they don't want. And there's a lot of beauty in wildflowers, and it's also really nice if you want some color and variety in your yard, in your outside space, with the lowest amount of effort possible.
Like you said, it's so low maintenance. It's just, leave them out there.
It's almost no maintenance.
Right.
So Apis mellifera honeybees are domesticated livestock. They were brought to the U.S. with European colonizers to pollinate exotic crops. So they haven't been here that long, but they are similar to other bees in that they are pollinators. They primarily drink the nectar of flowers and they pollinate plants. So bees in general are pretty unique amongst insects in that I'm taking insect ecology right now, for instance, and we talk about the fact that being vegetarian is also kind of like a newfangled fad in insect evolution because there aren't actually that many insect families that don't eat other insects. Most insect families at large will eat other insects, other animals as their source of food.
Those weird newfangled vegetarian insects. Can't believe them.
Yeah, that said, there is a high diversity in Hymenoptera, the class of insects that bees belong to, as well as ants. So there's a high diversity of different species, but there aren't many different insect families that have resorted to herbivory. So that's one of the cool things about bees. They are definitely on that new diet trend and being vegetarian.
Do you know why that is? Like why eating other insects is so prolific in the insect world? Is it because plants are relatively new evolutionarily?
That's correct. So it's to do with the evolution of angiosperms of flowering plants. So the kind of burst in Hymenoptera diversity and herbivorous insect diversity really took off in the late Carboniferous when there is a boom in the angiosperms in the flowering plants that were around. So until you had flowers, you didn't have things that could eat said flowers. So there's many more ancient insect orders that are eating things other than flowers because that did not exist as a food source at the time.
Right. That makes sense.
Honeybees they're interesting, but they're also really weird. I think one of the most common misconceptions people have about bees in general being bumblebees, sweat bees, honeybees, all of the bees, is that people know that honeybees live in large social colonies. They live in groups of thousands, really. But only honeybees and bumblebees really will ever get to that size. And really only honeybees will get into the several thousands of bees in one colony. They're the only bees that do that. Most other bees are solitary, which is a common misconception a lot of people have. So honeybees are definitely the black sheep in that they find the other black sheep and they live together in thousands.
Wow. I guess I never knew that. When you say solitary, do you mean like truly solitary? Like it'll be a single bee living on its own?
Yes, many native non-honeybees, most of them will live completely solitary, but there is some primitive eusociality being living in a group with other organisms of the same species. Some bees, like stingless bees, I know will live in small groups, maybe a couple dozen, probably never more than 100 or so. Even bumblebees, a large bumblebee colony is not going to be more than 500 bumblebees, and that would be gigantic. I'd say most of them are going to be 1 to 200 bumblebees. So the 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 is not an uncommon size for a honeybee colony. Only honeybees are doing that.
Wow. That's fascinating.
So to describe a honeybee, they are a small insect that I'd say is probably a little larger than the size of a thumbnail. They are typically going to be yellow and black colored. And so all insects have three major body segments or parts. They have the head, the thorax, which kind of relates to like the chest if you're thinking about mammals or us, and then the abdomen, which is kind of like their lower half and is usually where most insects will store a lot of their organs and stuff. So head, thorax, abdomen, and all insects have 6 legs, so honeybees too have 6 legs. They are specifically identified by having a heart-shaped face. This is an actual classification. So when you are identifying bees, native bees and all, if you go to a workshop, they'll say a honeybee has a classic heart-shaped face.
That's so cute.
I love it. Classic.
Their face has that quality of being rounded with that small divot in the center where their ocelli, their 3 light-sensing primitive eyes, are. Another common misconception, or I guess another fun fact rather, is that bees technically have 5 eyes, as do most insects. So ocelli are primitive light sensing organs. They're basically primitive eyes. Many insects will have like a little cluster of 3 in between their large compound eyes, which are what we humans think of as their true eyes, quote unquote. But if you look at them real close, they do have 5 eyes in total.
Are the ocelli like still useful since they have actual eyes too?
Yes, bees will still forage, say, when it's cloudy out, and to be able to sense changes in the light, ocelli are responsible a lot of the times for some of the signaling with light waves, whereas the compound eyes will do more of the large movement or sudden movement.
I will say for our cuteness scale, ocelli definitely increased the cuteness. I remember identifying flies, and my favorite dung fly had a black triangle on its head with bright orange ocelli, and it was just the cutest thing.
My orange ocelli girl.
Yeah, ocelli primarily are photoreceptors, so it really helps them orient themselves, especially if the sun is not out. They really kick in on cloudy days for helping them navigate in the space that they're in. And I say that they are important on cloudy days because they are really good detectors of ultraviolet light.
Ah, and they use that for navigation a lot?
Yes.
Nice.
So honeybees have the 3 major body segments, the head, the thorax, the abdomen. The abdomen is where the juicy bits are mostly stored, those like soft organs. They have a fuzzy thorax, that's where most of the hair is, but their abdomen is also fuzzy. If you look actually really closely at a honeybee, you'll notice that classic yellow and black coloration is actually because they have hairs on their abdomen and they have blonde hair, but their cuticle is actually quite dark. It's their hair that gives them that classic striped appearance. Another fun fact about bees that I think is really fun is that once they're born, when they emerge from a cell, they're really fuzzy. They have a lot of hair, and it's really cute because it almost looks like they have eyebrows. Sometimes they just have so much hair everywhere.
That's so cute.
Fuzzy babies.
And then as they get older and as they age, they become bald, just like some of us. So you can roughly tell the age of a honeybee based on how bald she is or isn't, because they have more hair as they're younger, and as they are older, they get darker because they're losing that hair that gives them the yellow color.
Wow. How old did they live to be?
So honeybees actually have very different lifespans depending on the caste. And so castes of bees mean worker, queen, or drone. And so these are actually reproductive classifications. So honeybee workers are generally the bees you're seeing out flying, doing the work. Probably most of the bees that anyone will ever see, if you're not a beekeeper, they're going to be worker bees, which are female bees that do not reproduce. The queen bee is a female bee, and there's only a single queen bee for an entire colony, and she is responsible for laying eggs, and that's it. All she does is lay eggs, and she's the mother of all the workers in a colony. The third caste of bees are drones, so these are the male bees. They all live different lifespans, so workers, their lifespan is determined when they're born and what they're doing. So bees I kind of liken it to when you're young, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with my life. I'm gonna try out this one job and then I'm gonna move on to this other one. And I say that because bees, they have specific jobs that they do at specific times in their life. So when they're young, they're nurse bees taking care of their larval siblings in the hive. Then as they grow up, they might be undertaker bees, where their job is to get rid of the dead bees in the colony. They're quite sanitary, so they'll pick up the dead bodies and toss them outside so they're not sticking up the hive. There are guard bees that are basically little soldiers that patrol the entrance of the hive and make sure there's no pesky skunks or bumblebees or ants trying to get in. I have seen bumblebees fighting with soldier bees. It's quite dramatic.
What? And you said all of these workers are female?
Yes, all the workers are female. The queen is female, and there are not many drones in the colonies.
The Bee Movie lied. All of their workers were male. I just want to put that out there.
I never watched it, but I'm disappointed.
Oh boy. I think what the Bee Movie got right stops with bees can fly and they are yellow and black, and I don't think they got anything else right.
Right, okay.
I have chosen not to watch the Bee Movie in a decision of self-care.
Good. It's probably for the best.
Most certainly. So bees have these different jobs, and another interesting fact is only the bees that make it to the end of their lifespan are foragers. So the elderly bees, the ones that are the most experienced, are the ones that are going on these treks to find food for the hive and bring it back. All the other bees up until that point are generally doing their jobs within or very close to the hive and don't really venture outside of the hive. And worker bees can last anywhere from a few weeks to a couple of months. In the summer, when you have a lot of work going on, the queen is laying a lot of eggs, and workers may only live for a month or two, but then in the fall, bees are storing up honey, pollen for the winter, and so the last batch of worker eggs that the queen lays, those bees will last throughout the winter, and they may last from 3 to 5, 6 months, depending on how long your winter season is, and they will live just long enough to kind of get the hive going for the spring, and then they will pass on. But the queen herself is one of the longest lived insects in Insecta because she can live for up to 3 years. They usually live 1 to 3 years, which is quite a long time for an insect. I think the oldest queen on record was about 5 years, which that's a long time.
Oh, wow.
That's an old bee, grandma bee.
These days, most queen bees are only lasting a year, and there's a lot of research going into why queen bees are not living to be 2 or 3 years like they once used to. But coming back to the last reproductive caste, the drones or the male bees, they usually don't live more than 1 to 2 months because their only job is to mate. And they're not valuable to the hive in which they're born because their job is to leave the hive and mate with another queen. And drones actually die after mating. So it's kind of a little funny to watch some of the worker bees with the drones in the hive because I have watched worker bees basically body slam drones out of the way because they don't actually contribute to the hive. They don't do any of the nurse, guard, undertaker, foraging behavior. They just eat food and take up space, and their job is to leave and mate.
Go away. You don't help with anything.
And in the fall, actually, because the bees are preparing for the winter, it's, resource intensive, the workers will shoo all the drones out of the hive. And if they try to make their way back inside, the workers will sting the drones to death because the hive can't support the bees that are just hogging all the resources and not contributing.
What?
Wow. We work for our food here.
Right. So drones are really only present in the productive seasons of the hive. So here in the Midwest, you're only going to see them summer, spring, somewhat in the fall, but they're going to be in their largest populations spring and summer. Meanwhile, if you go to Hawaii or places that have beekeeping pretty much year-round, then you will see drones year-round, and there won't be so-called evictions because there isn't a winter season in which they're really sparing their resources.
Nice. Is this a good time to move on to how it's queer?
So, queerness in honeybees. Honeybees are really fun because as we talk about the difference between sex and gender, so only humans really have a gender, but bees have a sex, and most bees are going to be female, but you do get intersex bees. Hermaphroditic bees will actually occur, and you'll see them. You can tell the difference because worker, queen, and drone bees all look different. Drones are really known for having gigantic eyes. They almost look like they have the eyes of a fly, and they have such big eyes so that when they fly outside of the colony, they can find queens to mate with. And so I have seen hermaphroditic or intersex bees that have the head of a drone with those gigantic bulbous eyes, but then it has the body of a worker, which is generally smaller, and they have a stinger. Only female bees can sting. Even with native bees, it is always the case that only females can sting because a stinger is a modified ovipositor. An ovipositor is a structure for laying eggs, so males do not lay eggs, and so males cannot sting.
So can queens sting?
So queens can sting, but they typically will not sting humans because it's just kind of annoying for them. But queens do use their stinger quite prolifically, and if they are newly emerged in a hive. So one thing, I think one of the coolest facts that I really love about honeybees is that they have kind of a democratic process for selecting a new queen. So when a honeybee egg is laid, every honeybee worker egg, female egg, has the potential to become a queen. And the only difference between a worker bee and a queen bee is that during the early larval development, what will become a queen bee is fed a much higher proportion of royal jelly, which is a really protein and nutrient-rich substance. And that diet of royal jelly leads to the production of a queen bee. But any bee has the possibility to become a queen.
You really are what you eat in the bee world.
If a hive has a queen that has left, maybe the colony has swarmed, maybe the queen that they have is just not doing too great, and they're like, our mom sucks. We want a new one. They might start building queen cells to house and create a new queen bee. Another cool thing is queen bees. I mentioned that drones, their only job is to mate, after which they die. This is somewhat gruesome, but as they're mating, drones, as they evert their hemipenis, it breaks off and they fall to their death, usually with their gonads in the queen, and the queen typically mates with anywhere from 10 to 20 different drones.
Wow.
She mates once in her life, and then she's set for the entire rest of her life, whether she lives 1, 2, 3 years, because she's mating with so many males, and she stores the sperm in her spermatheca, which has all of that genetic material. As I mentioned, there's those different classes of workers and drones. So worker bees are female, and they are diploid. So worker bees come from fertilized eggs. Whereas drones, if the queen decides to lay a drone egg, a male bee, the egg is actually unfertilized. It only has one set of chromosomes.
What?
Yeah. So drones have no father because it's an unfertilized egg, but they have a grandfather because the queen herself comes from a fertilized egg, which is really wild to think about.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So it's really just mainly the queen's DNA that gets passed along, with the exception of recombination.
Yes, and so there's a lot of work that has been done about honeybee eusociality, because honeybees are really the only bees that once they sting you, as in humans, honeybees will die because they have a special adaptation to have a barbed stinger, and that specifically evolved for mammalian skin. So it catches in our skin, mammalian skin, and the stinger of honeybees also comes out with essentially an injector that will continuously inject venom for a period of about 20 seconds, which is why it's always best to get a honeybee sting out as fast as possible. The faster you get it out, the less venom that you're getting from that sting. And since that's organ, it eviscerates them when they sting you. So that is obviously not great. So the honeybee that stings dies, but this is only the case again for honeybees, because this is an adaptation to defend against mammals, which are typically going to be the predators of honeybees. Like we're thinking of skunks and bears. Another fun fact about bees is that they really hate dark hair. And people joke that bees are racist.
Oh no.
This joke is because, so honeybees obviously don't have the eyes that we do. They have their 5 eyes, but they're mostly about seeing colors and wavelengths of light. They're not about seeing crisp images. So when they see someone with dark hair approaching the hive, they're like, ah, yes, large figure, moves, upright, dark hair, that's a bear. That's definitely a bear. So they are much more aggressive if someone with dark hair is around a hive. And I have seen this and experienced this myself. My undergraduate advisor has like completely white hair. He just went white really early. He's not that old, but he can just stand in front of the hive and the bees are like, this is a weird rock. They don't bother him. And then meanwhile, I'm standing at the same distance and they're like, oh man, that thing, that's a bear. We gotta get rid of the bear.
Is this why, like, the outfit for people who keep hives is white?
Yes. So bees can't see red and they can't see white. So white cloth is generally cheaper to produce, which is part of the reason usually when you're beekeeping, it's hot out. Another reason why it's white. And also, white is not a threatening color. It does not look like a flower. It does not look like a bear. So white is a great color for beekeeping, but you will occasionally see people beekeeping in red with people who have very, very gentle bees. One of my beekeeping mentors would often only wear a veil to beekeep and didn't wear gloves or any other protective equipment because he knew his bees and their temperament, but he would wear like a red hoodie to beekeep and didn't really need anything else because the bees can't see red. But black, not a good idea.
Guys, bees can't find Waldo.
No.
Yeah, I always wear white. I actually wear like khaki pants from like Old Navy as my field pants when I go beekeeping, and some people think I like look fancy because I'm wearing like khaki pants, and the only reason why is because it's a light color and I can't wear like black to beekeep because the bees will be upset.
So you said there are intersex bees and then their gender is basically chosen by their mother.
They're sexed by their mother, yes.
That's amazing and so queer because, like, you know, the popular heteronormative thing is like, it's your genetics. Okay, but like, who's giving you those genetics, right?
Assigned female by mom. Yeah, and the hermaphroditic bees, they're really uncommon. They're not as common as intersex people, for instance. But I believe that they do contribute to the hive, especially knowing that the hermaphroditic bees that I've seen, they have a stinger and they try to sting me. So they are engaging in like defensive postures and the behaviors that honeybee workers do.
That's awesome. So that doesn't ostracize them.
So they get to be part of the hive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know so much about what they do in the hive, and I don't know that there is really much research done into what hermaphroditic bees do because they are so rare. Like, I've heard once it's maybe 1 in every 3,000, 1 in every 5,000, 1 in every 10,000 bees will be an intersex bee. So they're quite rare.
Future research.
Maybe, but you'd have to figure out a way to get the intersex bees.
Right. The replications would be.
Someone who ends up studying bees for their lives, and if the opportunity comes up, because there are studies where it's like a very small sample size, but it's like, you can't do this with a large sample size, so we're going to record what we see here.
Right.
There you go.
I think a summer or two ago, one of the hives here, we found it was producing a much higher rate of hermaphroditic bees, so it was probably going to be once every 1,000 bees there was a hermaphroditic bee, which is insane. Because that was the first time I had seen one in my then 6 years of doing honeybee research. Because while they're very uncommon and it's just trying to spot a single bee that mostly looks like other bees in a colony of several thousand, it doesn't really happen, right? But it's when you're doing like research and we're getting our hands on a bunch of bees, we're like, hey, there's a bunch of these guys.
Right. That's awesome. But still, 1 in 1,000 is 3 times as often.
Right, and I'm not even sure that there is really a concrete number on how many bees are intersex because it is just so uncommon and there hasn't been any interest in studying them. Because if we're thinking about like honeybees, again, domesticated livestock, they make money, they make food. And so hermaphroditic bees are kind of rare, and we don't know if they do all the things that worker bees do, so there hasn't been that much interest in them because they're hard to find, and who knows if they are actually doing the things we want them to do.
Right. And everything, like you said, it's like economically important, so I bet all the research goes toward that sort of thing, right?
I have a research proposal titled The Secret Life of Hermaphroditic Bees.
Yes. If only there was like a tiny bee-sized GoPro and we could like find a hermaphroditic bee.
Well, they have trackers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They don't like track where they go, but you can tag them so you can see when they come and go.
That's pretty cool.
It's quite cost and labor intensive to do that. And you do need expensive camera. So there is a way to barcode bees, and there is research here at the U of I that works on barcoding bees, but it is definitely something that is not within the budgets, I think, of a lot of researchers, and definitely not in the budget of a backyard beekeeper at all.
Right.
One day.
Thank you so much. I learned so much during this conversation, honestly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. From probably within a week of meeting you, I was like, I need this person to come on the podcast. And I'm so happy we got you on here because you're so cool and you study such cool stuff. Thanks for coming on and being our first guest.
Great first start.
And remember, everyone, be who you are.
Yeah.
Love who you will. And remember, you're queerly natural.
Queerly Natural was created by Ilana Zeitzer, Elizabeth Furman, and Hannah Roden, with music by Migfist20. Thank you, Migfist, for putting your music in the Creative Commons. You are very talented. Visual design for the show is done by Ilana Zeitzer. To get updates about the podcast, follow us at Queerly Natural on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We also upload all of our sources and episode transcripts to our website, queerlynatural.com. Above all else, if you liked what you heard today, tell your friends. Thank you so much for listening, and keep an eye out for our next episode coming November 25th. Until next time, stay queer and remember, queerly, it's natural.